What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Ask E Everything. I hope this video finds you all well and surviving and thriving all of the chaos that's going on in the world. Hopefully this video will provide you a little bit of an escape from all of that. Want to first start by, again, just thanking you for tuning in and thanking whoever it is out there that became my 4th subscriber. Super happy to sign in and see that. I know a lot of you out there might have a lot more subscribers that are watching this, but as you're growing this channel and putting the work in, it's really awesome to get that reward when you sign on to your dashboard. So thank you. The old goal was to go from 2 to 4, so now the goal is to go from 4 to 8. So please subscribe if you do like this video. We've got a good one for you today. The question of the day is anything truly possible? Is it so that we can literally do anything? And the other way of looking at it would be, is anything actually impossible to achieve? I don't know about you, if you've been following anything with regard to the rocket launch and taking our awesome astronauts up to the International Space Station. If you have tuned into any of it or even followed it or even just seen it on social media, I would be surprised if you weren't sitting there being somewhat amazed by it. I know I certainly was. I wasn't really even aware that this whole launch was going on for some reason. I just haven't been paying as much attention to the news because there's been so much repetitive BS in the news. But when it came about that this was happening and that we could actually watch it, with the technology that they were able to use to show it all on TV and on the internet, it was just so awesome. So I became pretty captivated by it, and honestly it just let me kind of sit there and be awestruck, and I'm trying to think of the last time something actually struck me that way. I mean, I've been alive long enough to see a fair amount of space travel and things like that, but there was something about this one in particular that really struck a chord with me. And maybe it's just where I'm at in life or the way I've been thinking lately, but something really synced up for me, and it started to make me think about the realm of possibility and just the realm of human capability and the realm of kind of achieving goals and dreams that are quite literally beyond the realm of what people think is possible. So of course, a big shout out to Elon Musk on this video. Honestly, been a good amount of inspiration for me in general over the past couple of years, but specifically with this last feat that was achieved. And I know there were a lot of folks involved in it. Elon himself said that he thinks somewhere on the measure of 100,000 people were probably involved from start to finish to actually get this project to take place. So obviously there's a lot of spread out credit that is deserving, and we certainly want to give that to all those folks. But Elon definitely is the catalyst for this whole thing, and if you don't already know enough about him, which is hard to not know a bunch about him, but this is just kind of our modern day dreamer, and honestly just a modern day example of what someone can achieve. So when I started to think about this, what they had achieved here, and I started to think back a little bit about just the mind-blowing nature about the timeline to actually make this happen. And everyone was talking about, of course, in the American way, with kind of this sense of puff chest pride. All you kept really hearing about was that it's been almost 10 years, or it's been 9 years and X amount of months since we had American astronauts in an American rocket launching from American soil to get up to the space station. And while that's definitely a neat achievement, for me, my mind kind of blew right past that. 10 years isn't really a huge deal. And I started to think about just the scope of flight in general. And this is where my amazement really got triggered. So I started to do a little research and look back and think to myself, man, what's more impressive to me that it took 10 years to do this American feat is that this event is happening, not very long in the timeline of our human achievements since the first flight. So I went back and kind of studied up again on the Wright brothers and reminded myself that their first, quote, flight took place in 1903. And then I started to look a little more at the timeline of flight in general and saw that, our first commercial airline flight, if you can even call it that, which took place between Tampa and St. Petersburg, Florida, which is not a very long flight. And I think the plane flew like 15 or 20 feet over the water to get from point A to point B. But that took place in 1914. It literally took 11 years from that first, flight at all, down North Carolina, to actually get to the point where we were taking passengers on a commercial flight. That seems like a pretty great feat until you compare it to the next landmark, which I was curious about, which was getting into orbit. And here we are in 1961 with the Russians putting the first man into orbit. 1961 is literally 58 years after the first time that we've ever flown a plane, that humans in the history of humankind have ever actually had a flight of any sort. And less than 6 decades later, we've got a human being in orbit. Even more amazing than that is that 8 years after that, the Americans put man on the moon. And so in 1969, we've got someone on the surface of the moon literally just 66 years after we've gotten the first airplane to float above the land, for like, a couple hundred feet. This fact kind of really, hit me in just a miraculous sense. And, it became kind of the foundation for doing this video on just this realm of possibility. And the question, to really the broad scope of humankind, but as you're watching it there, this is about you sitting here asking and answering the question, is it truly possible to do anything? Is anything truly possible that we can imagine? From 69 forward, we did a bunch of moon, travel and space travel. And then, of course, we've gone through some periods where, that went a little more quiet just because of funding and all these kind of things. Then SpaceX comes along, and, Elon developed SpaceX, 18 years ago from today. So right around 2002, 2003, the start of SpaceX. And then 18 years from that point, from this one person with a dream starting this private company to explore space, he's got now this rocket that he's created, that he's built in conjunction with NASA, bringing men up to the International Space Station. So again, even from 1903, if you want to go all the way back to the first, flight of the Wright brothers, to, just a few days ago when we were actually able to achieve that in the year 2020, you're talking about just a little over a century of time, right? 117 years to go from the first floating object, controlled manned aircraft, to, launching this rocket from Florida and sending it to the International Space Station in a flawless manner. This is really amazing stuff. Now, I understand that the scale to which this occurred on is pretty grand. And so you might be sitting there thinking, well, I'm no Elon Musk, or I don't have, that intelligence, I don't have that, capability to do something like that. But, as Elon mentioned, he by no means would suggest that he did it by himself, right? He had a ton of people around him. What he did have, though, was the dream, the initial dream, and the initial goal, the initial idea to challenge things that were deemed impossible. Now, we've been to the space station before, we've been to the moon before. Hopefully we'll see a moon mission in the next couple of years. But as you well know, if you do follow Elon at all, he does not want to stop at the moon. His goal is to colonize Mars. And again, a lot of folks sitting out there will say that this is an impossible feat. As a matter of fact, it's probably in space travel to date, deemed the most impossible feat that someone is actually considering trying to do. Remember, though, prior to the Wright brothers flying their airplane, flying a manned aircraft was deemed impossible, right? People had been trying to fly things for thousands of years prior to that. And, one day they actually made it happen. Obviously, it took a lot of work. From that point on, I'm sure people were starting to dream pretty quickly about getting into space, or that you're using aircraft to even just transport people across the country and the world. Only a few years later, really, on the scale of time, only a few years later, we've got that happening. And then, we have man on the moon, within, 7 decades of that initial flight. this is an amazing example of the accomplishments that can take place when someone really just believes that what everyone else believes to be impossible, that they believe that it's actually possible. And so, the answer to the question for me here is truly anything possible? I believe that it is, and here's why. I believe that if you are interested in trying to pursue something that others or anyone around you, or even that yourself, believe may be impossible, I believe if you have the will to try, if you are interested in the process of finding out whether or not it is possible, I believe that this makes it possible. The reality is until you find out that something is impossible to achieve, it's possible. Right? Just by definition, because it can only be impossible once it's been proven that it cannot happen. And this does not mean necessarily that the first time you fail at it, it's impossible. And I think that this is the most important lesson here that we're going to discuss today. By definition, if only once every chance at achieving something has been exhausted and it has not happened, that really would be the only true case of something being deemed impossible. After every single effort by every single person interested in trying, by every mind that could ponder something, only at that point that every single person had tried every single imaginable idea and failed would something truly be impossible. Now, given the fact that there are 7 billion people in the world, and given the fact that a single mind alone can by definition, generate an endless or an infinite amount of thoughts, the math here is in our favor, and it means that it's impossible for something to be impossible. There are actually a lot of great quotes using that word that basically deem, impossible, that impossible is impossible almost by definition. The definition of itself cancels itself out. Muhammad Ali is another person that had a really great quote about this when I was looking up quotes on possibility. And he was someone who kind of famously said that impossible is an opinion, not a fact. And I really like that way of looking at things because, you've probably experienced, I know I have, a lot of people around you or that you encounter in life when you have a great idea telling you that it's something that you can't do. A lot of times it's just for protection or out of, just ignorance. Sometimes it's out of jealousy. Whatever the root of it is, there'll always be people around that aren't dreaming and that are naysayers. And that, for whatever reason, just don't believe that something's possible. Those people need to just stay where they are and exist and live a mediocre life. For the rest of us that actually sit here and dream and actually do think to ourselves, I would love to do this, or I would love to see this, or I'd love to be a part of this. In, my lifetime, I'd love to see this happen. Two things to remember. First of all, there's no reason not to try it. And again, if you're going to try it or get into the pursuit of it, you're going to be successful in achieving it. Because until you, either die trying or until, again, you've gotten everyone that you can to get involved in the effort that's interested, and they all fail, and it's deemed impossible, you're going to be on your way to making it possible. I'm by no means sitting here saying that you can have some, amazing idea of something that you want to do and instantly achieve it. As a matter of fact, I think that's an important thing to take into consideration when you are going after your lofty goals, is that they don't necessarily happen right away. And, the same way that when the Wright brothers set out to, fly a manned aircraft, they failed many, many, many times. You will always, when you're, I shouldn't say always, but oftentimes when you're pursuing something that's grand, you will fail so many times before you get it right. And then that magical one day you get it right, and from that point on, hopefully you can actually sustain the success of what you're trying to achieve. But you don't want to be someone who listens to folks around you telling you what you can't do. Life should be about the things that you can achieve, the things that you want to achieve. And, I know myself personally have definitely been guilty, over the past couple of decades of shutting a lot of ideas down just because either someone else suggested that it wasn't a good idea, that it wasn't going to be possible, or just because, my own self, when I asked myself or looked within myself, I realized that, I just probably couldn't do it. The problem is I never tried. And so, what happens when you do that is you're left with these kind of ambitions, and that become basically regretful ambitions, just things that you never actually put the time or heart or soul or energy into trying to achieve. Now I'm of a different mindset altogether, which is that there should be nothing that you want to accomplish that you shouldn't try to accomplish. And so for me, especially recently, after watching this whole, rocket launch and just getting kind of re-inspired with regard to achievement, the last couple of days I've spent really trying to, zero in on what I want to accomplish. And what it has done is it's even dug up and kind of unearthed some previous pursuits that I was very interested in doing, but for, one of 1,000 reasons I had kind of sidelined because I just believed that I couldn't do it at the time, or that I just couldn't do it in general. So now I've got kind of my thinking cap on, going to work on trying to pursue some very specific things that I really do want to make happen. And it's amazing with the new state of mind and just with kind of that confidence that pursuing it in and of itself is part of that process. And that once you're in that process of achieving the quote impossible, you're making it possible. Every step along the way, you're increasing your odds or your chance at making it possible. But if you do not try and you do not actually pursue it, and you actually just, let the naysayers or the naysayer in yourself say, no, you can't do that, you assuredly will not do it. And that's the best point here probably, is like, as soon as you say, I can't, you won't. It's that simple. You won't. And you'll fail, and you probably will never be able to again, because you'll shut yourself down and you'll just count yourself out. So instead of being someone who's thinking to yourself, I can't, we've got to really re-invoke that spirit in ourselves that we can. That's what people do. That's what human nature does best. Humankind does best. We do. We're doers. And we can achieve really whatever we want when we really put our hearts, minds, and souls into it. And in the case of a grand achievement like the SpaceX NASA program, well, it obviously took a person to gather a lot of other great people around him to actually be interested in the same thing and the same pursuits. And together, of course, after many years and a ton of money and a ton of time and a ton of work, they're able to achieve these things. Again, if you have a simple goal for your life that you want to do, that you can do on your own or that you can do with a partner, then it's as simple as that. Sharing that interest with someone who you think cares about it, getting them behind you, supporting you. You want people to lift you up here instead of saying, no, you can't do that. You want people to say, you know what? Go for it. You should fucking do it. And, if they can help you in some way, then they probably will. And maybe you can help them with some pursuit of their own. But, the reality is it only takes one person to start it. And I think we'd all be more amazed every time we actually let ourselves do or pursue something that we really want to do. I think we would be amazed more often, the more often that we did this, how much we actually do have to offer that pursuit, without, as long as we don't count ourselves out along the way. Anyway, there's a lot more to say about this, but the gist of it is that I do believe that anything is possible.